So I was praying and asking the Lord to give me something to share with y'all today that would be encouraging, that would be a blessing to you. And this verse popped into my mind that we had talked about a couple weeks ago in our home fellowship group. And I love this verse. I think it's so wonderful. And it's in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 7. The end of all things is at hand. Therefore, keep sane and sober for your prayers. Above all, hold unfailing your love for one another, since love covers a multitude of sins. Practice hospitality ungrudgingly to one another. As each has received a gift, employ it for one another, as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks, as one who utters the oracles of God. Whoever renders service, as one who renders it by the strength which God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. The end of all things is at hand. And then he says a couple of other things that I think are really important for us to pay attention to and to heed and to actually do these things. Because I know right now a lot of people are, that pre-rapture panic thing is setting in, and people are going, oh, is the Lord going to take us this fall, or do we have to wait another year? I don't see anything happening. What's going on? And look, all you have to do is trust the Lord. That's all you have to do. It's super simple. And what Peter says here is keep sane. Keep sane and sober for your prayers. So this is a good time to be praying, right? This is a good time to be talking to the Lord. If you've got some issues, if you're afraid, if you've got anxiety, go to Jesus. Go to the Lord. God wants you to go to him with those kinds of things. The second thing he says is above all, okay, even above keeping sane and sober for your prayers, he says, hold unfailing your love for one another. Love is the pinnacle, it's the apex, it's the thing that we're actually moving toward. When Christ sets up his kingdom, it's a kingdom that's going to be characterized by love and peace and joy and righteousness. When God sets up the eternal kingdom, it's all about love. Love and peace and joy. And one of the reasons Peter says that we are to hold unfailing our love for one another is because love covers a multitude of sins. We're going to stumble along the way and make mistakes. And Peter says that we're to love one another, to hold unfailing our love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. And then he talks about practicing hospitality, being welcoming, opening your heart and your home to other people. Then he talks about how we're supposed to share our gifts with one another. As each has received a gift, employ it for one another, as good stewards of God's varied grace. So there's all kinds of giftings that God has given each believer. And we're to use these, the stewardship, these gifts that God has given us for the benefit of one another. That's why we have them. They're not for us. They're for us to share with one another. And then he talks about whoever speaks as one who utters the oracles of God. That is, when we speak, we're speaking carefully and we're speaking with the heart of God that is, expressing himself through us. And then whoever renders service, that is, there are people who have gifts of physical service where they're actually engaged in activity for the Lord. It isn't necessarily speaking, but it's a stewardship of action. And they're supposed to do it with the strength that God supplies. So we're all in this together with one another. We're all brothers and sisters in the Lord. There's nobody that has a higher up position or a lower down position. We all do what we do for the benefit of the building up of the body of Christ. So I really like that passage in 1 Peter. I want to read one more from Hebrews 10, verse 23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, and not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. If you're a believer, you want to be encouraging your brothers and sisters in the Lord, stirring up one another to acts of love and good deeds, and being in fellowship with one another as much as is possible. And it says that we're supposed to do this more and more as we see the day drawing near. And what's the day that he's talking about? He's talking about the day of the Lord, the day when Christ is going to begin setting up his millennial kingdom, the day when Christ is going to return, and all the events that are associated with his second coming. So we can see the day drawing near. We absolutely can. We are not going to be doing this for another 10 years. We're not going to be doing this for another 5 years. And it's my fervent hope that we're not going to be doing this for, past next year. We can see the day drawing near. We see the plans that the enemy has. We can see how this harlot system is paving the way for the beast to arrive, the Antichrist, the beast kingdom, and for the unveiling of all the evil that's going to be taking place. And the fact that these people are calling this basically their Jubilee, their great reset, that they're super excited about ushering in this time, we can totally see the day approaching. It is here, it is at the doorstep. So we don't have a lot longer to wait. We really don't. Whether it's a few days or maybe a few months, we don't have long to wait. This world is not going to continue the way it is for very long. It's just not. So the problem that we have, we're not very good at waiting. People want to see stuff happening. We want to see the action. And if we can't see God at work, right now in what we consider our timing or our time frame, people start to panic. And you really don't have to panic. You don't have to be afraid. God is here with us. I think of a couple of passages in the Bible where people began to panic. And one of them was at the Red Sea, when God had delivered the children of Israel from Pharaoh, brought them all out after doing all those plagues, including the death of the firstborn at the Passover there. And then the children of Israel are backed up against the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army is coming straight at them. And what they see is what they see with their physical eyes. They can't see spiritually what's going on. They're just looking at the situation from a human perspective. And they're thinking, we're going to die here. We're absolutely going to die, because we can't get past the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army is headed straight for us. This is going to go really bad for us. But we all know what happened. God had a plan, a way of escape that was through the Red Sea, where they walked through on dry land. And not only that, but God destroyed their enemies. Pharaoh and his army and chariots and horses all ended up at the bottom of the Red Sea. So in 2 Kings chapter 6, we have the story of Elisha and the Syrians, and how the Syrian army was going to come, and it was actually surrounding the city that Elisha was in. And there was this army, verse 14. So he sent their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was round about the city. And the servant said, Alas, my master, what shall we do? And he said, Fear not, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Okay, and so Elisha was seeing into the spiritual realm, and he could see with spiritual eyes what was going on. And then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, Strike this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he struck them with blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, This is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I'll bring you to the man whom you seek. And he led them to Samaria. So kind of tricked them there. But the point is this, is that when we walk in the Spirit, when we're walking in the power of God and in the power of the Spirit, we want to have spiritual eyes that are open. We're activating our spiritual sight, not our physical sight, because whatever is happening in the world around us is not the final story. And so the writer of Hebrews says that you can see the day approaching. Well, there's two ways you can see it. One is just by looking at the general climate of the world around us, and we can see that the end is approaching. And there's another way of seeing. It's by seeing with spiritual eyes. One of the prayers that I've prayed over the years is, Oh Lord, help me to see. There's two kinds of seeing, and there's two different ways of discerning the things that are going on in the world. One is using natural sight with a natural understanding, and the other is spiritual sight with spiritual understanding. And Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 12. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is from God, that we might understand the gifts bestowed on us by God. And we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who possess the Spirit. The unspiritual or natural man does not receive the gifts of the Spirit of God because they're folly to him. And he's not able to understand them because they're spiritually discerned. The spiritual man judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. So there's a way that we can view the world. There's a way that we can think about the things that are going on. There's ways that we can perceive what reality is. And reality is not found in the things that you see with your eyes or in the understanding that you have through your soul. Real reality is actually what God says. It's what's happening in the spiritual realm, like the servant of Elisha who couldn't see spiritually that there was an army of God that was surrounding them, that they were totally and perfectly safe. What his natural eyes saw alarmed him because overnight this army had appeared and he felt like he was in danger. But Elisha could see the spiritual. He understood from a spiritual perspective that he wasn't in any danger at all. And that in fact, he was actually in control of the situation because God gave him the authority to strike these men blind and then to lead them where they needed to go, which was back home again. So when we operate in the realm of the Spirit, when we choose to view things through a spiritual filter, using spiritual reality instead of natural things, the world looks very different. It looks really, really different. And one of the things that it gives us is a sense of confidence in God. And this confidence gives us joy and peace. And we're not panicked, okay? We don't panic because God is with us. I just encourage you to do a couple of things. Number one, keep sane and sober for your prayers. Keep sane, okay? And there is a human kind of sanity, and then there is a supernatural sanity that comes from the Lord. And that's the sanity we're looking for, is the one that comes from Jesus. Keep sane and sober for your prayers. Love one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Serve one another, practice hospitality, use the gifts that God has given you. If you're to speak things, be sure and say them as though you're uttering God's words. If you're serving people in acts of service or in just action of any kind, do it with the strength that God is going to give you. If you see the day approaching, you can see it with your physical eyes. You can also see it with your spiritual eyes. And when our spiritual eyes are opened, there's nothing but victory, peace, and joy. So I just pray for you all today. I just pray that the eyes of your heart would be opened, that you would know what God has called you to, what is the greatness of his power that's at work in us, that you would exercise your stewardship the way God has asked you to do. And you know, when Christ returns, wouldn't you like to be found doing those things that he asked you to do? Serving one another, loving one another, practicing hospitality, being sane and sober for your prayers, being grounded in the love of God, being able to see with your spiritual eyes things that are going on in the world and not panicking. You know, God has nothing but good things for us. If you're a Christian, your world is full of hope. It's full of hope. So during this time of waiting, when we're just waiting to see, where the shoe is going to drop, what's going to be happening, how God is going to be moving, choose to have peace in your heart. Choose peace, choose life, choose Jesus. Ask him to open the eyes of your heart so that you can see what's going on in the spiritual realms. That's the vision that we want to have. So it's not what we see with our natural eyes. It's what we see with our spiritual eyes that really gives us the edge, that actually leads us into the victory, walking in the power and purpose of God. So I hope you're encouraged. Just keep walking with Jesus. Everything is going according to plan. We'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.